So let's talk about a few tips to help you out around in your garden. First, let's talk about the soil as far as drainage and aeration. Two solutions to help you with better draining soil and better aeration in your soil: vermiculite and perlite. They both have water retention properties, but not in the same way. Vermiculite absorbs and holds water, while perlite just holds a bit of water in its surface grooves, so it's minimal moisture retention. They make an excellent combination because the vermiculite will hold some moisture for you, while the perlite helps create pathways for excess water to drain and allow the soil to breathe or help with aeration. Perlite is an amorphous volcanic glass, which means it doesn't have a clearly defined shape. Those experts, I swear. Although, we'll see it as little white granules. Perlite contains magnesium, iron, and aluminum, in small amounts, of course. The vermiculite can assist with water and nutrient retention, and helps with heat absorption and moisture control. Something to absorb your heat and control your moisture. Table for two, please. Vermiculite will keep your soil moist for longer, so this is a great additive for houseplants, as this will allow you to set a schedule with longer intervals between watering. Vermiculite is a micaceous mineral, which just means it resembles mica in structure. It has layers of mineral buildup, so it looks like little scales. This is really nerdy stuff, and that's beyond my scope. The experts can better explain its composition and formation. You should research more on perlite and vermiculite. They can be game changers for your plants. But wait until you see the expert words and processes for this stuff. I've recently learned English, so I'm just going to stick with the simple words for now. In our case, for us growers, we get better soil and prettier plants. That's simple enough for me. Well, if you want greener plants or have yellowing leaves and it's not due to overwatering, you'll want to try some magnesium sulfate. It contributes to chlorophyll production. That's what makes our plants green. You can get similar results using Epsom salt around the base of your plants. Not a lot, maybe a tablespoon every month or so, a teaspoon for your smaller plants. This will help your plants if they're pale green or yellow. You'll notice yellowing in the older leaves first, or the ones closest to the bottom of the plant. Magnesium sulfate will likely deter slugs and snails from your plants also. Something else that can help would be manganese. This will help our plants metabolize the nitrogen it absorbs from the soil. It's also a contributor to photosynthesis, and you'll never forget that word. Manganese deficiencies are usually a result of highly acidic soil or too much organic matter in the soil. Actually, you'll experience similar symptoms of yellowing if the manganese is low because the deficiency is affecting photosynthesis. You'll likely see intervenoclerosis also, which is when you see yellow veins on your leaves. Both nutrients are absorbed by the roots of the plant, but you can give your plants a foliar feed to help them out. A foliar feeding is just spraying the leaves with the fertilizer solution. Magnesium can reduce the uptake of manganese, so do your research to determine if your specific plant will have that issue. Look into the types of macronutrients and micronutrients your plants like. The experts have a ton of information to help you identify ways to increase nutrient absorption and the best ways to apply both magnesium sulfate and manganese for your specific plants. Iron will give you deeper green foliage also, as it too assists with chlorophyll production, or making stuff green. We want stuff to be green. How green? Super green. Nitrogen assists in most of the plant's processes, so consider adding a fertilizer with a good balance of nitrogen, and then add a little bit of iron to enrich your soils. I've used Ironite and I was happy with my results. There are other brands to try, but that's all up to you. I tend to be a bit economical at times too, so you never know. Organic fertilizers that deliver iron to our plants would include blood meal and bone meal. These are actually good for bulbous plants like gladioli or caladiums. I've used Epsoma bone meal on one set of ours. Take a look at the difference. After seeing this became our go-to fertilizer for our caladiums. I was very impressed with the results. I mixed 1 tablespoon into a 1-gallon watering can, and these were our results. Of course, you want to use less if yours are in smaller containers. Ours were in containers that were fairly large, which is probably why they lived there for so long. You'll want to research and notate supplements and fertilizers that work best for your plants. If you're unsure of what to use, just stick with a balanced fertilizer until you determine what you'd like to use. I say this because we need to keep in mind the different types of plants we may have around the house. You can use a balanced fertilizer on your hibiscus, gardenia, or azaleas. However, they all prefer acidic soils, and there are fertilizers specifically formulated for those types of plants. If you're growing fruits and veggies, you likely want to stick to organic fertilizers. Fish emulsion is my recommended organic fertilizer for edible plants. It's very easy to mix and use, but it is very smelly. For us Floridians, it just smells like you brought home too many shells from the beach. If you're using a water-soluble fertilizer mix, and your plants are turning brown or getting crispy on the edges of its leaves, you're using too much fertilizer or the mixture is too strong. Take the 1 tablespoon scoop, or whichever scoop measurement came with your water-soluble mix, and only use half of that amount per gallon, rather than a full scoop. A more diluted fertilizer is always better than a fertilizer that is too strong. You can make your plants very unhappy or worse. And we don't want worse, so let's play it safe. So let's address the sun and heat. This could help you out, but this is primarily for us Floridians and gardeners in similar climates. Be careful with your full sun plants, as that doesn't always equate to full heat tolerance. When your plants require full sun, it's for the leaves. The stems, base, and roots are usually protected from intense sunlight. In Florida, your problem will definitely be the heat. A perfect example would be a fuchsia plant. It lives in full shade, gets lightly watered, but will still wilt and retire during our Florida summers. This is what makes it a very difficult plant to sustain in Florida, but it is extremely pretty and really want to figure this one out. Only 3 of 4 Floridians have ever been able to keep their fuchsia thriving for more than a year or two. We applaud them for their efforts and determination. Now, why is that? When your plants are wilting, it's not the soil that necessarily needs attention. Your plant should be the focus. More than likely, you've witnessed your plants wilt, although you've watered them within the last 24 hours. This is due to moisture evaporation from the plant, but its roots can't replenish the water fast enough. Not that there's no moisture in the soil, it just can't be absorbed and replenished fast enough. The best solution to this problem is water, but not a watering. We don't necessarily need to water the soil as if it hadn't been watered previously. A small amount of water can help with this. Give your plant half a cup of water, or a full cup if it's a large plant. That way you can give it some moisture to work with until the heat subsides. You could just shower the plant also. Again, not a watering, just a shower to break the heat cycle. Take orchids for example. You wouldn't want to give your orchid a deep watering, or even a moderate watering if it's displaying signs of heat stress. You'd miss it until its actual watering day arrives. This is the same premise. You're just giving your plants a little shower to help them cool off up top. Also, don't lean heavily on that advice about not watering midday. It will not harm or unalive your plants. Honestly, if watering during the hottest part of the day could unalive plants, there would be no plants in Florida, and we have plenty of them. Also, we could address our problems with the weeds practically free. Imagine if you could just go water the weeds during the hottest point of the day, and that solves your weed problems. Wouldn't that be fantastic? And cheap? And we wouldn't need to introduce chemicals to the gardens. That would be phenomenal. Just go water them in the middle of the day. If you do get burns on your leaves from water droplets being magnified by the sun, that means your leaves were not wilted or drooping, and you likely didn't need to water the plant at all. Droplets don't remain on leaves that are pointing downwards. That's simple physics. It is inefficient watering, yes, as it is likely too hot to allow the soil to become saturated, but it will break that heat cycle and create some humidity for your plants. You'll need to determine if you want to give your plants some relief or hold out until it becomes dehydrated completely, and then probably prepare yourself to go buy another plant. Once your plant has experienced dehydration too many times, you want to start shopping for new plants. The heat will wilt your plants. The sun will further dehydrate them and the soil, and then turn your plants into herbs. So make sure your full sun plants get some shade in the afternoon, or ensure your plants get some amount of moisture during those hot summer days here in Florida. Remember, our Florida full sun is completely different than everyone else's full sun. Let's focus on keeping our plants alive in our Florida gardens. As for keeping the soil moist, you could buy some mulch to help address that issue. This works for plants in the ground or even your potted plants. You could blanket the soil, and that's just putting a thin layer of material on top of the soil. And this can be done with grass clippings or mulched leaves. So you'll want to keep 2 to 3 bags of your leaves left over from the fall. They're great to add to your compost too. Take a look around the next time you're out and about. Look at how thriving plants seem to have shade over their roots. It'll be from their own canopies, or something else blocking the sun after a while. Trees are a great example. They always branch out far enough to cover their roots. Again, some plants just can't take full sun and full heat. Do keep in mind the heat can even make shady areas dry, so just be mindful of those areas that get too warm even when there's no direct sunlight. For our specific gardens, we normally run our sprinklers for 20 minutes per zone 3 times a week. When our plants are wilting and it's not a watering day, we just give them a 5-minute shower with the sprinklers to break the heat cycle and introduce some humidity for the evening. Heat absorption, moisture control, and now steamy evenings. Where are we going with this? Let's continue. If your plants are wilting, first check the soil, unless you know for sure you've recently watered the plants. You want to do this because you run the risk of overwatering your plant and, waterlogging the soil. I'm so proud of you. If your potted plants are root bound, that will cause them to wilt also, as there is not enough medium to retain water for the roots to effectively absorb. So take a look at this tomato plant. This was watered the night before, and look how wilted it is now. I intentionally put it in a full sun location because that's what's normally recommended for tomato plants. But look at what happened. Now this plant won't get watered or even a shower. I will simply move it back into a part shade location, just a couple of feet from where it's at now. And as you can see here, she is much better. She sits partially in the shade. The leaves that have reached out towards the sunlight are the only leaves that get several hours of sunlight. It can pull on your heartstrings to see your plants wilting. That doesn't necessarily mean it needs a normal watering. It just needs to find a way to cool off. This is a good time to consider the airflow in your gardens or your homes. Nobody likes warm, stagnant air, especially our plants. And nobody likes to sit in pure sunshine all day. Perhaps the Texans, they've somehow adapted to that supernova they get during the summer. And here I thought it was hot in Florida. I was very wrong. Hello Dallas, thanks for the hospitality. The Starbucks on Jupiter was my favorite place to be. Imagine that, a Starbucks on a road named Jupiter. Amazing. Be sure you're taking the most appropriate approach to solve the heat problem. If it's in a pot, move it into an area that gets some shade after a few hours. If it's in the ground, we'll need to build some shade for them or grow some plants that will provide them or the soil itself with shade. You can look into ground covering plants, as this would be their expertise. Weeds actually can help with this problem too. Just make sure they don't get too comfortable and try to take over the joint. Honestly, a weed is only a plant that you don't like in your garden and is taking over an area. All plants have a way of spreading, so any plant can become a weed. We just like the more exotic ones, don't we? A big problem I've noticed is that people put plants where they think it looks nice, rather than putting the plant where the plant feels nice. They run into issues with proper care. Find a plant more appropriate for the location you want to enjoy plants. That way you can stop unaliving your plants and we can remain friends. And I don't want you to wager our friendship. So a few plants that you can put in those drought tolerant areas, you could try something like purslane or evolvus to act as ground coverings. They have beautiful flowers and they can really assist with keeping the sun from causing too much evaporation. Well, I hope you found this information helpful, and I hope the weather is perfect on your next day off. Thanks for stopping by. Tale mergotera.